Welcome to a new story. Before we begin, please support us by subscribing, liking, and activating the bell button. Let's begin. It was a stormy Friday night when Emily found herself home alone. Her parents had gone out for a dinner party, leaving her with a stack of homework and the flickering glow of her laptop. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and rain lashed against the glass like desperate fingers trying to get in. As the clock ticked past 9, Emily felt a familiar sense of unease settle over her. She had always been a little jumpy, especially at night. The shadows in her room seemed to dance, and every creak of the old house sent shivers down her spine. But tonight was different. It felt as though the very walls were whispering secrets. After an hour of futile studying, she decided to take a break. She made herself a cup of hot chocolate and settled onto the couch, wrapping herself in a thick blanket. The TV flickered to life, casting a warm glow that chased away some of the shadows. She flipped through channels until she found an old horror movie, something about a haunted house. It was cheesy, but it distracted her from the growing anxiety in her chest. Halfway through the film, she heard it, a soft thud from somewhere in the house. Her heart raced as she paused the movie, straining to listen. Silence enveloped her, broken only by the sound of raindrops pelting the roof. She shook her head, dismissing it as the house settling, or perhaps a branch hitting the window. But then she heard it again, a distinct sound, like footsteps on the wooden floor above her. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She lived in a 2-story house, and her parents had left the upstairs lights off. The shadows there seemed darker, more menacing. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself, trying to convince her racing heart to calm down. Maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But as she sat there, wrapped in silence, the footsteps came again, slow and deliberate. She grabbed her phone and texted her parents. "Are you guys on your way home?" No response. The footsteps continued, now accompanied by an unsettling creaking sound. Emily's mind raced with possibilities. What if someone had broken in? Her heart pounded in her ears as she considered her options. Should she call the police? Hide? Just then, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, making her jump. The sound was unmistakable. A door slamming open. Panic surged through her veins as she scrambled off the couch, clutching her phone tightly. "Hello?" she called out, trying to sound brave, but failing miserably. Her voice trembled as it bounced off the walls. No answer came back, only the relentless patter of rain. She tiptoed toward the staircase, her heart hammering against her ribcage. Each step felt like a betrayal to her instincts, but she couldn't just sit there and wait for whatever was up there to come down. She reached for the banister and peered up into the darkness. "Mom? Dad?" she called again, louder this time. Still no response. With a deep breath, she took a step onto the first stair. It creaked beneath her weight, sending a jolt of fear through her body. She hesitated, but pressed on, ascending slowly into the dark abyss above. As she reached the top of the stairs, she could see a faint light coming from her parents' bedroom at the end of the hallway. The door was ajar, and shadows flickered inside. Was someone in there? Emily's instincts screamed at her to run back down and lock herself in the bathroom, but curiosity pushed her forward. She crept toward the room, heart pounding louder with each step. Suddenly, she heard a voice, a low murmur that sent chills down her spine. It was too muffled to understand, but it sounded close. Too close. She reached for the doorframe and peered inside. The room was empty except for the dim glow of her parents' bedside lamp illuminating scattered clothes on the floor. But then she noticed something else. One of the windows was wide open, rain pouring in and soaking everything. Her breath hitched as she realized that it wasn't just rainwater pooling on the floor. It was mixed with something darker, something that looked alarmingly like blood. Before she could process what she was seeing, a loud crash erupted from downstairs. Something heavy hitting the floor. Emily spun around, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she sprinted back toward the staircase. As she reached the top step, she saw him, a shadowy figure standing at the bottom of the stairs. He was tall and cloaked in darkness, his face obscured by a hood. Emily froze, terror rooting her to the spot. "Emily!" he called out, in a voice that sent ice through her veins. "I've been waiting for you." Without thinking, she turned and bolted down the hallway toward her room. She slammed the door shut behind her and locked it tight. Heart racing, she backed away from the door and pressed against the wall, desperately looking for something, anything, that could protect her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her parents. "We're on our way home. Be safe." But before she could respond or call for help, she heard footsteps approaching again, this time deliberately slow and methodical. "Emily!" he called again from outside her door. "You can't hide forever." Panic surged anew as she searched for a place to hide. There was no time to think. She dove under her bed just as the doorknob rattled violently. The door swung open with a creak that echoed through the silence. From beneath the bed, Emily could see his shoes enter the room, heavy boots that left muddy prints on her carpet. He paused for a moment before moving further into the room. "Where are you?" he taunted softly, his voice dripping with malice. Emily held her breath, praying he wouldn't look under the bed. The minutes felt like hours as he rummaged through her belongings, throwing clothes and books aside as if searching for something specific. Then he stopped. "I know you're here," he said softly, almost conversationally. "You can't escape me." With shaking hands, Emily pulled out her phone and texted 911, her only lifeline in this nightmare. Just as she pressed send, he knelt down beside the bed and peered into the darkness beneath it. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, his cold and calculating, hers wide with fear. The sirens blared outside just then, a distant wail that grew louder by the second. The intruder's expression shifted from curiosity to rage as he lunged for her. But before he could grab hold of her ankle, there was another crash from downstairs, the front door being kicked open by police officers shouting commands. "Get down! Show us your hands!" they yelled. In that moment of chaos, Emily scrambled out from under the bed and bolted toward her window. She threw it open and climbed out just as officers rushed into her room behind her. She landed hard on the ground below, but didn't stop running until she reached a neighbor's house, where she pounded on their door until someone answered. The police apprehended him moments later. They'd found him hiding in a closet upstairs, where he had tried to escape when they arrived. He was taken away in handcuffs, but Emily knew that no amount of distance could erase what had happened that night. As she sat wrapped in a blanket on her neighbor's couch, waiting for her parents to return home, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling that shadows lurked just beyond sight, waiting for another chance to creep into her life when she least expected it. The storm raged on outside, but inside her heart remained heavy with fear, a fear that would linger long after that night faded into memory. As the storm continued to rage outside, Emily sat on the neighbor's couch, wrapped tightly in a blanket, her mind racing. The police had assured her that the intruder was in custody, but the shadows of that night clung to her like a second skin. When her parents finally returned, their faces etched with worry, Emily rushed into their arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. They hugged her tightly, their warmth a balm against the chill that had settled in her bones. "What happened?" her mother asked, panic lacing her voice. Emily recounted the terrifying events, her voice trembling as she spoke. Her parents listened intently, their expressions shifting from concern to disbelief, and finally to anger at the violation of their home. After the police left, the family gathered in the living room, where they turned on every light and locked every door. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary and more like a cage. They talked late into the night, sharing stories of bravery and resilience, trying to reclaim their sense of safety. Days turned into weeks, and while the physical scars of that night faded, the emotional ones lingered. Emily found herself more vigilant, hyper-aware of every creak and shadow. But slowly, with the support of her family and friends, she began to reclaim her life. She started going out again, engaging in activities she loved, painting, reading, and even volunteering at a local community center. Each step forward felt like a small victory against the darkness that had invaded her life. One evening, as she painted in her room, she caught a glimpse of the sunset through her window. The vibrant colors spilled across the sky, illuminating everything in a warm glow. For the first time since that night, she felt a flicker of hope. Emily took a deep breath and decided to face her fears head-on. She joined a self-defense class, not just for protection, but to reclaim her sense of agency. Each punch and kick helped her build confidence, reminding her that she was stronger than the shadows that haunted her. Months later, as she stood on the rooftop of her building during a community event, surrounded by friends and laughter, Emily felt a shift within herself. The storm had passed. She was no longer defined by fear. She was a survivor. And while shadows might always exist in the corners of her mind, she learned to embrace the light, knowing that even in darkness, there is always hope for brighter days ahead. With each sunrise, she chose to live fully and fearlessly, ready to face whatever came next. If you like the story, subscribe to the channel to receive all that is new.